This program is about unsolved mysteries. Whenever possible, the actual family members and police officials have participated in recreating the events. What you are about to see is not a news broadcast.
When a baby girl named Mariah was born 3 months early with critical problems in her undeveloped lungs, her chances of survival seemed grim. Then a nurse employed a controversial technique called therapeutic touch. While it doesn't have the blessings of the medical establishment, therapeutic touch may have helped save Mariah's life. The story of Mitchell Shigemoto and James Pearson is a moving saga of interracial friendship honed to its finest edge by the rigors of war. When Mitchell was cut down by enemy fire in Vietnam, James became his hero. Tonight, Mitchell needs your help to find the man who saved his life. On the day David and Alice Vieira were married, no one imagined that their love and affection would someday disintegrate into violence. No one imagined that 14 years later, David would go into hiding as a fugitive, accused of killing his wife. Join me for these fascinating cases. Perhaps you may be able to help solve a mystery. You are witnessing a controversial healing technique called therapeutic touch, or TT. Its practitioners, who must complete a comprehensive training program, believe that by running their hands a few inches above the body, they can pinpoint areas of disease or injury. TT practitioners also claim that they can direct energy from their bodies to others in order to promote healing. To the layman, therapeutic touch sounds pretty wild. Although it is taught at major universities across the country and practiced by tens of thousands of nurses and doctors, its effectiveness has long been at the center of a heated debate. Does therapeutic touch really work? Just ask Janet Ziegler, a clinical nurse specialist and experienced TT practitioner from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. In November of 1984, Janet drove her 3 boys to the regular martial arts class. Besides his interest in sports, Janet's youngest son, Michael, was already an accomplished pianist.
Michael, who was only 7, went in, and as he was slipping his shoes off, he put his hand up in the jamb of the door. By that time, I'd gotten out of the car, and Michael ran out of the school, and I don't think he realized what happened. He wasn't crying or anything, but his finger was bleeding profusely, and he said, "Mom, I think I pinched my finger." And I looked down at his finger, and it was gone, and I said, "Michael, where is your finger?"
Michael, what's wrong?
I got my finger caught in the door.
Okay, stand very still.
Janet did not panic. Almost instinctively, she began to treat Michael with therapeutic touch.
This immediately calmed him. He didn't shed a single tear at all through the whole process.
Okay, sweetie, let's go wash it off.
I looked in the door jamb to find the finger, and I found it. It was actually unrecognizable. It was totally squashed, and of course, the nail was gone. It really didn't look like a finger, but it was the only thing in the door jamb, so I assumed that's what it was.
It was scary. I hadn't started to cry or anything, but the blood and seeing my finger gone and wondering what's going to happen, it was just a fear that went through me. Well, how was I going to be able to keep going?
A friend rushed Janet and Michael to a local emergency clinic. Along the way, Janet continued to perform therapeutic touch. Although the injury was not life-threatening, Michael's promise as a pianist was now in jeopardy.
Hey, big guy, what's your name, huh?
Mike.
And what happened here?
His finger was cut off in the door. I need you to sew it back on.
I'm sorry, but this is never gonna take. I don't think we can reattach this finger.
Please try. He's a pianist. He's got to have this finger.
Need to suture kits and
The doctor, you know, with my insistence, agreed to do it. And he turned to me and he said, "What are you doing to him?" And I said, "I'm doing therapeutic touch to keep him calm."
The energy of the finger intact.
So he said, "Well, I don't know anything about that." He said, "But whatever it is you're doing, keep doing it, because I've never seen a child so calm in such a situation."
Despite his misgivings, the doctor reattached the fingertip. He recommended that Michael see a plastic surgeon as soon as possible.
The very next day, when I went to the plastic surgeon, he unwrapped it, looked at it, and said, "I'm sorry, this is not going to take. He's going to lose his finger." And he just wrapped it up again, a dry dressing, didn't do anything at all to the finger. And it went like that every week.
Hello, doctor.
Mrs. Ziegler? Oh, Michael? Let me see your hand.
For 8 weeks, Janet used therapeutic touch on Michael's finger.
Yes, every week.
For 8 weeks, the plastic surgeon warned that the reattachment would probably never work.
Look, the scab's gone.
Looks great.
They removed the bandage, the scab, and everything, and I saw like almost a brand new finger with new skin and everything. I was totally overwhelmed.
There's a good deal more color than I expected.
I don't think there's any swelling.
Well, appearances can be deceiving. Can you do this?
Can you feel that?
Yeah.
Well, that may not mean anything. To be honest with you, Mrs. Ziegler, I think the finger's gonna fall off, and probably before summer. So why don't you make an appointment with me then, and we'll see where we stand. All right, Michael?
The plastic surgeon was wrong. Even before the bandage came off, Michael was back at the keyboard. Less than a month later, he placed first in a piano competition. A decade later, music remains an important part of Michael's life.
The experience of my accident and what my mom did for my finger most definitely changed my feelings about therapeutic touch. Before it happened, I would go to my mom, get the treatment from her, but was a little skeptical. You know, it looked sort of funny and would joke about it. After this experience, I was totally 100% believing in her therapeutic touch and that it definitely worked.
Trained TT practitioners like Janet Ziegler believe that the human body is a complex field of interacting energies that can literally be felt and that can be disturbed by injury or illness. TT practitioners use their hands to reorder these disturbances. In Michael's case, his finger mended perfectly, although 2 physicians had predicted the opposite. Should therapeutic touch take credit for such successes? Not everyone is convinced.
I think the practitioners are good and honest and kind nurses. I think their therapy, which stresses energy fields emanating from people, which they seek to influence with their fingers, is baloney.
The debate has raged since the 1970s, when a nurse named Dolores Krieger first developed therapeutic touch and defined what makes an effective healer.
What you were moved by originally is a compassion, you see, a compassion to help another person. And it's the power of compassion that brings you across that bridge.
The good effects are primarily placebo effects. That means that what the patient believes will happen will happen.
A couple we will call George and Marie could care less about placebos. They learned about therapeutic touch firsthand when they were a heartbeat away from a personal tragedy. In November of 1993, Marie was 6.5 months pregnant when she was stricken with preeclampsia.
2 weeks ago.
Her body was releasing lethal toxins into her bloodstream, threatening her life and that of her unborn child.
We can't wait any longer, George. We have to do a cesarean.
Is my baby gonna be okay?
Baby's fine. She's very healthy. When was the last time I saw you?
I remember going into the delivery room and I felt myself slipping away. I did feel myself slipping away. It felt as if it would have been very easy to just let go because things were just so drastic at that point. But I knew George was waiting for me and this baby that I wanted more than anything in the whole world. And I knew I had to live, I had to survive for that baby.
Next thing I remember, it sounded like a little screech, like a little cat. My daughter was born. And I had mixed feelings and mixed emotions because I was really worried about my wife. And I was worried about my daughter. The situation kept seesawing back and forth. My wife got a little better, my daughter got worse.
George and Marie's daughter, Mariah, was born nearly 3 months premature. She weighed less than 2 pounds and soon developed critical problems in her immature lungs.
I'm Father O'Brien.
Hi, Father.
I'm very sorry you're having such a rough time.
Little Mariah continued to weaken, and hospital officials summoned a priest to baptize her.
Shall we do it now?
Yes.
May God bless this water and this child and all of his children. Name this child.
Mariah Eugenia.
Mariah Eugenia, I baptize you in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
The nurse disconnected the wiring, all the tubing from the baby, and put the baby in my wife's arms. And my wife held the baby, and she started to cry. And I thought that was it. I thought the baby was dead.
In a last-ditch effort to save Mariah, doctors put the tiny infant on a respirator. After the delicate procedure, one of the intensive care nurses began treating Mariah with therapeutic touch.
She wasn't slipping drastically under, but she wasn't advancing either. I continued to take care of Mariah for the rest of my shift and, continued to work on her, direct energy in a therapeutic touch manner to her, and continued to do therapeutic touch throughout her process in the hospital.
Basically, I'm a very logical, bottom line, shoot straight from the hip person. And for someone to talk to me about alternative medicines, they would have to prove it to me.
Her oxygen numbers, the levels are going up. That's good, right?
She's responding well.
Look at her.
I'm an accountant. I deal in numbers. And to see this, I can relate to it.
Tell Mommy.
Every time Joanne took care of the baby, every time Joanne had the baby got better. The baby's numbers, the saturation, the heart rate, the numbers got better.
Marie was also in critical condition. Joanne began to use therapeutic touch with her.
Joanne did basically the same thing for me as she had done for Mariah. And little by little, it worked. And the pain went away. And Joanne would not take credit for it. It was funny, she would just chuck it off like it, was just an everyday thing for her. It was part of her nursing technique. Oh, which one little girl want? The little girl wants her foodie.
Today, Marie and Mariah are back home and healthy. The terrifying crisis of November 1993 is fading into the past, replaced by the busy joy of caring for a baby. Still, George and Marie will never forget how close they came to tragedy.
The bottom line is, my baby's alive, and I have the doctors to thank. I have the whole nursing staff to thank, and more so I have Joanne to thank, because I believe without Joanne, we wouldn't have this baby.
If you ask George and Marie or the Zieglers, they will tell you that therapeutic touch definitely works. But we still wanted to find out for ourselves. A young woman named Vicki Ewald allowed Unsolved Mysteries to film her first session with a TT practitioner. When we began, no one knew how the treatment would turn out. In 1986, Vicki contracted a stubborn cold that escalated into bronchitis and then a debilitating case of chronic asthma. Such breathing problems can be triggered by either physical or emotional stress, but a parade of specialists failed to help Vicki.
Finally, I was just sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I did, out of duress, just go see somebody that could possibly help me.
Vicki went to see Joanne O'Reilly, the same nurse who attended Mariah in the hospital.
Joanne had me close my eyes. I had no idea what she was doing to me. I mean, I sensed that something was going on around me, but she wasn't physically touching me. And I really felt, for the first time today, relaxed and I guess, for lack of a better word, centered. And as we've been around each other today, I was coughing and wheezing most of the day. And since Joanne has worked on me, I've coughed once.
After the session, Vicki experienced a rush of unexpected emotions.
Well, from the onset, I think, of asthma when I first got to the city, I also did lose a sibling, a brother. That kind of triggered the down, you know, the
onset of the asthma?
The onset, yeah. That's when I got very sick and couldn't get back up. And then 2 years ago, I lost my mother and
so
a
you've
sister.
had a lot of grief-related.
Yes.
In the month after her first session, Vicki Ewald went for 3 more treatments. Vicki reported that her breathing improved to the point where she felt comfortable reducing her asthma medication. Even the most dedicated proponents of therapeutic touch admit that it doesn't always work. Perhaps in the future, medical science will unravel the mystery of this intriguing technique. In closing, one note of caution. All the practitioners we talked to emphasize that therapeutic touch should never be performed by anyone without the proper training. The residence of the Lombardi family in the Columbus, Ohio suburb of Westerville. An ordinary townhouse on an ordinary street, home to a typical middle-class family. But on August 30th, 1990, Cheryl Lombardi, a housewife and mother, would make a tragic discovery. One that would forever rip the family from the tranquility of suburban life. Cheryl had come home at around midnight, and she assumed that her 22-year-old son, Tony, would also be home soon. She says that around 12:45, she heard a door closing and the sound of footsteps. Cheryl went to Tony's room to say goodnight.
Son?
Cheryl was horrified to find her son lifeless, a single gunshot to the head. Tony Lombardi was just a few months shy of his 23rd birthday. For Cheryl Lombardi, the familiar pattern of life was shattered. That morning, her home swarmed with detectives, with her son's bedroom the center of a crime investigation. In such cases, clues found at the scene will often read like a book, clearly revealing what took place and implicating any assailants. But to those investigating Tony's death, the clues seem to tell 2 conflicting stories, 2 scenarios that would pit Tony's family against the police.
Our investigation has been concluded, and our investigation says that Tony committed suicide.
I'm very upset with the fact that I know our son was killed. I know he did not commit suicide. And I don't think they have a right to rule someone's death a suicide when it was not a suicide and just close the case and go on like it never happened.
This home video, made a year before he died, shows Tony Lombardi just as his friends remember him, fun-loving and always ready with a smile. Tony was a hit with the ladies. In fact, at the time of his death, he was seeing 3 women, one of whom was already living with a man. Tony worked the swing shift at a baby food factory, setting up cans to be filled with formula. But on August 29, 1990, Tony didn't show up at the plant. Early the next morning, Cheryl found him in his bedroom, dead. Police arrived at around 1:15 a.m. They discovered Tony's car was missing from the garage, perhaps stolen by an assailant. According to the police, the investigation moved swiftly and by the book.
Our normal procedure is to contact the detectives, have them come, and we treat all death scenes as a homicide until we prove it otherwise.
Inside, on the floor near the body, police found a .38 caliber semi-automatic pistol.
We'll tag us under 93748.
On the bed was a single spent .38 shell. Then investigators found a drunk driving citation in Tony's pants pocket, which pushed the inquiry in an entirely new direction. 2 days before his death, Tony had been arrested for driving while intoxicated.
The impound lot.
Detectives quickly solved the mystery of Tony's missing car. It had been impounded by Columbus police at the time of the arrest.
Okay, thanks for the info.
In addition, Tony had faced fines and possible suspension of his driver's license. To investigators, a portrait had now emerged of a young man stripped of his freedom and despondent over impending legal problems.
Right now, everything that we have and the evidence that we have indicates Tony's death was a suicide.
About the only fact not in dispute is the time of Tony's death, several hours before Cheryl came home at around midnight. But Tony's family believes his death was nothing short of cold-blooded murder.
I believe that there was a struggle because our son's watch was found broken off of his arm on the floor. He had an 1.5-inch gash over his left eye. He had a broken jaw. He had bruises. The fact that he was found nude, he would never let anyone see him nude. Those are all things that I think should have been looked into.
Based on her observations that morning, Cheryl believes that not only was her son murdered, but the killer was still in Tony's bedroom even as she moved about the house. Cheryl's evidence is disarmingly simple: the light in Tony's bedroom.
Going up and down the steps, you can see my son's room, and the door was closed and there was no light on. Going up and down the steps as many times as I did, there is no way I could have missed the light being on.
Cheryl assumed Tony hadn't yet arrived because the light in his bedroom was off. Cheryl says that 45 minutes later, she heard the noise. When she saw that the light in Tony's room was on, she assumed he had finally come home.
Son? When I went to the room, I could immediately see the light was on underneath the door. It was obvious.
Son?
And I opened the door, and that's when I found my son dead.
Who could have turned on the light? Cheryl now believes it was the killer, trapped in Tony's room by her arrival home.
I believe in my mind that I came in on someone that had killed our son. I believe that I surprised him. And then when I went to my bedroom to get ready for bed, they thought that was a good opportunity for them to leave. And I believe that's what I heard, was someone leaving.
She was questioned by a detective there later on, after she had composed herself a little bit, as to what the noise was she heard. He specifically asked her, was the noise a house noise, say a door shutting, air conditioner kicking on, step creaking? And she said, I can't remember what it was. I really don't remember.
They'll never change what I heard and what made me go to our son's room. I went to our son's room because I heard him come in my mind. I heard the door shut. To me, my son had come home.
To Tony's parents, there was further evidence pointing to murder. In the week before he died, Tony was the target of 2 different death threats. A woman who lived next door witnessed the driver of a white pickup truck screaming at Tony.
You ever cut me off like that again, and I'll kill you. You hear me? I said, do you hear me?
I hear you.
Where do you live? I said, where do you live?
Right here.
Right here? Good. I got it.
We called the police and told them the woman's name and where she lived, which was a next-door neighbor. To my knowledge, as of yesterday, they have still never talked to this woman.
Tony's father overheard the second death threat just a few days later.
I was checking my messages and I heard this threat on our voicemail of a gentleman, a young person, telling Tony that he had a gun and was going to use it if Tony didn't stay away from his girlfriend. And at that point, I brought that up to Tony, and he said not to worry about it, that he had a friend of his call this person who knew him well and thought it could be worked out that way.
Tony's best friend, Andy Royer, agreed to mediate.
I told Tony that I'd talk to the guy and see what the deal was on it, and I called him up, and he said to me that his problem was not with me, it was with Tony, and that he would take care of it. Tony would get what was coming to him.
The lead detective on the case contacted as many people as he could on the case, either by phone or in person, and attempted to question them about what they had said or somebody said they had said. And we found no evidence that Tony was under any immediate death threats.
The police never contacted me about Tony's death at all. I never heard from anybody about anything.
The Lombardis dispute the official conclusions drawn from some of the physical evidence. For example, a test that revealed Tony had recently handled a metal object.
Any metal is going to give that trace metal detection, but the conclusion that we come to is that Tony was holding that gun in his hand, and part of that conclusion stems from the trace metal detection.
He worked on a can line downtown at the Columbus plant. He handled cans daily. Naturally, you would have metal on your hands from working with that.
The position of Tony's body and the trajectory of the fatal bullet are also subjects of bitter controversy.
This was our son's bed that he was actually killed in. And when I found him, he was laying on the bed, and there was 2 pillows propped underneath his head, or underneath his shoulders, I'm sorry. His head was above the pillows. He was laying on the edge of the bed. The pillows were under his shoulders. His head was above the pillow.
Her son's head was on a couple of pillows, and the detectives examined the angle, removed that spent bullet from the headboard, and had every indication there that that bullet, the trajectory of that bullet was correct.
And the bullet hole in the headboard is behind the pillows. And as you can see, it's down there, and if you take a pencil and you insert that into the headboard, you can see that the bullet hole is much lower than the way I found our son.
The bullet hole does not make sense to me. Unless there was some pressure on top of Tony holding him down, the bullet would have been much higher in the headboard.
Finally, Cheryl says the county coroner found bruises on Tony's chest directly under his clenched hands. To Cheryl, proof her son was forcibly held down by an assailant. The last minutes of Tony Lombardi's life remain clouded by controversy. As far as the police are concerned, the 22-year-old took his own life, a conclusion supported by the county coroner, the sheriff's department, and the district attorney.
The Westerville police sure have sympathy for the family. I mean, anybody would have sympathy for the family, and it's a very sad situation, and they've suffered a lot of trauma. But, you know, we have to deal in the facts, and the facts of this investigation reveal what happened was a suicide.
Until they open our son's case back up and change the cause of his death, I will not stop until the last breath is taken from my body. And if I do not exceed to be able to get that done till the day I die, then I'll fight him from eternity.
Next, an ex-GI searches for the unsung hero who saved his life in Vietnam. To natives of Oahu in Hawaii, the exotic is commonplace. Most of them would probably drive right by the farm that Mitchell Shigemoto and his wife Connie run and never give it a second look.
All the chickens, I think we overfed them.
Thank you.
A passerby would never guess that Mitchell Shigemoto has a story to tell. In fact, has an unsolved mystery that he hopes our viewers can help solve. Back in 1963, Mitchell was a 17-year-old volunteer in the United States Army. He was 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighed 110 pounds. Nevertheless, he signed up for the demanding 173rd Airborne Division.
Since you ladies don't know how to march, we're gonna take a little run.
Mitchell was the smallest man in basic training and the only Asian American in his company. From the start, he faced an uphill battle.
Due to my size, I was told that I could never make it being a paratrooper. So that in itself gave me the incentive to try harder. We started maybe with about 800 men, and the graduating class was maybe less than 300. So, you know, it was quite an accomplishment just to get through it.
It was tough being a part of the 173rd. It was clearly an elite airborne unit with its own special esprit de corps, created specially to go to Vietnam, first to be deployed by helicopters in combat, and the only combat unit to make a parachute combat jump in Vietnam.
In February of 1964, Mitchell Shigemoto became a full-fledged member of the 173rd. The unit was stationed in Okinawa before transfer to Vietnam. Mitchell was all too aware of his physical resemblance to the enemy.
That's where I initially started getting some problems because at that time in the Army, we got paid once a month. And we got paid in cash, and I put the money away, and somehow, one way or another, it got stolen from me.
It was common knowledge around the barracks that Mitchell was being victimized. Only one soldier stepped forward to befriend him.
Hey man, we're going out tonight. Do you want to come with us?
Oh, I don't feel like it, eh?
Hey, it's gonna be me and a couple other soldiers. Come on.
Maybe next time.
He knew that I didn't have any money. On his way out, he dropped a 20 on my bunk and just left the barracks. It really caught me by surprise. I was thinking, like, he must be quite a person to even be generous enough to help out a person who's basically a stranger yet, you know, because I was fairly new there. I didn't get to know very many people yet.
We're gonna have fun.
In time, Mitchell became a regular in James Pearson's group of friends. They went everywhere together.
In Okinawa, there's this black section of town they call Four Corners. And I used to go down there with him and feel comfortable. And we could sit down and listen to the music. And as long as they knew that James was my friend, I had no worries at all.
In May of 1965, the 173rd Airborne shipped out to Vietnam. At the front, Mitchell's Asian heritage became a major problem, and his friendship with James was more important than ever.
I remember one particular incident when we came back off of an operation to our tent city, and that's our chance to get hot meals. One of the guys who was serving, he didn't want to serve me, so when I got in front of him, I just stood there and he just looked at me and said,
Move on, Jap. Hey, you got a problem? Yeah, I don't serve zipper heads. Let's go. You want to go? Come on! Come on!
What's the problem? Why don't you just do your job and serve the soldier?
All right, just relax, okay?
No. You relax, or it's gonna be me and you.
All right.
The business of being an Asian American
Are you all right now?
in combat in Southeast Asia is probably beyond my capacity to really understand it. We were killing people who looked just like Mitch. And I don't know how he dealt with that. It must have been extremely difficult for him. It's a burden that many of us didn't have to deal with, over and above the burdens of, am I going to be killed, maimed, what's going to happen to me today?
By the end of 1965, the war had significantly escalated. 9 months after the 173rd Airborne arrived in Vietnam, they found themselves facing Viet Cong guerrillas on an almost daily basis.
The enemy was very good at picking the times and places that they engaged you. So often we were in open positions and having to confront them in concealed positions. It was dangerous work.
January 2nd, 1966, a Viet Cong bullet tore through Mitchell Shigemoto's thigh.
James was immediately by my side. There was one sniper that was keying in on us. James took a position right in front of me, just like he was trying to block off the shots, you know. James actually saved my life. There was another guy, Salazar. They pulled me to cover. And then a medic came by. He asked me what kind of pain I was in, you know, and he gave me a shot of medication to try to take the pain away. And then he moved on to catch up with the company. That's when, I guess, James and Salazar decided to take me back to the evacuation point.
James Pearson feared that Mitchell would succumb to shock. He and the GI named Salazar defied regulations and carried Mitchell to safety.
Maybe in the military textbooks, you're supposed to continue with your mission, and the fulfillment of that mission actually protects you all. But, you know, that was his best buddy there. And I could never fault him for what he did.
If they didn't stop, James didn't stop to give me aid, I probably wouldn't be oriented enough to know which way to go to get to an evacuation point by myself. So you could really say that James actually saved my life.
Pick you right up. Is he gonna be all right?
He'll be fine. He'll be fine. Get back to your unit.
All right, man. Hang in there.
All right.
Gonna be all right.
Yeah.
I'll see you later.
I'll see you.
Mitchell had no idea that he would not return to the 173rd Airborne, that he would never serve beside James Pearson again. A few weeks later, Mitchell was sent home to Hawaii. He never saw James Pearson again and never had the opportunity to properly thank the man who saved his life. After our broadcast, all that would change in a most remarkable way. A viewer in San Bernardino, California, retired Lieutenant Colonel Truman Plants, took it upon himself to track down James Pearson. 1 week later, Lieutenant Colonel Plants found him in Chicago. And before long, James, his fiancée, and his 2 grown daughters were on their way to Hawaii to visit Mitchell Shigemoto and his family. As Mitchell's relatives gathered to welcome James, the 2 old comrades caught their first glimpse of one another in nearly 30 years.
Mitchell. How you doing, pal?
Great.
It's great to see you. Great to see you.
You still look the same.
It was complete, total joy. Happiness. Just great to see you. I had to compose myself, you know. It was just completely overwhelming and unbelievable. Connie, how are you?
Mitchell's wife, Connie, greeted James in traditional Hawaiian fashion. After all, this was the man who saved her husband's life.
I really did. And who is this one? The bottom line, I wasn't going to leave him out there alone under those conditions. I couldn't have did it. Well, regulations permitted it, rules permitted or not. I just couldn't have did it.
It took a lot from a real special person to do something like that. And my wife, she, you know, when she heard that story, she made it a point to try to locate him with no success until we found you guys.
That's my next objective.
James spent a full week in Hawaii with Mitchell. The two of them never stopped talking about the past and the future, planning the time when they would see each other again.
So how's it feel to be back together?
They haven't come up with that word yet. When they come up with that word, I'll write you and let you know. But there's no word for this feeling, you know, for right now. They haven't come up with that word.
When we return, from childhood sweethearts to murder, the tragedy of David and Alice Vieira. June 29th, 1974. In the main church on the Portuguese island of St. Michael, twin sisters Alice and Georgina Arruda married their sweethearts. Alice was 17, and her new husband, David Vieira, was just 16. David and Alice were first cousins, but such unions are common among traditional Portuguese families. On that festive day, no one could have imagined that 14 years later, and 5,000 miles away in America, Alice would be the victim of a vicious murder. And some of the same family members would gather again to mourn at Alice's grave. Alice Vieira's life and death seemed to have been shaped by age-old Portuguese traditions. She grew up in a society where marriages were arranged, where a daughter was brought up to obey first her father and later her husband. It was a devoutly Catholic world where only death could truly end a marriage. Alice and David were born on St. Michael, one of a group of islands west of Portugal known as the Azores. When Alice was 9, her family emigrated to New Bedford, Massachusetts, 35 miles south of Boston. Even in America, Alice's father was determined that his children would be brought up in accordance with the old ways.
My dad was very strict with the girls. We weren't allowed to wear makeup, we couldn't wear shorts, and definitely we couldn't have boyfriends. You know, it was go to school, come home, do housework, and stay in the house. We were not allowed to even sit out on the porch. That's how strict he was.
Alice was 12 when an unexpected letter arrived from Portugal. It was from her cousin David, then 11 years old. To Alice's surprise, David was proposing that they be engaged. What some might have regarded as no more than a child's infatuation was taken very seriously by a traditional family like the Arrudas.
At first, my mom says, oh, you know, you're kind of young, and my father right away insisted that she should start writing to him because that was his family, and knowing that, you know, that'd be nice being married into the family, so he gave the okay on Alice. And she wrote back to David stating that they would be going out by writing.
The letters continued for 5 years. David and Alice never once talked on the phone. They didn't see each other until the summer of 1974, when Alice and her family returned to St. Michael for the wedding.
At the time that David asked Alice for marriage, Alice insisted also on marrying him because she thought it would be better if she would have a little bit of freedom, which we never had.
David and Alice eventually settled near her parents in New Bedford. Although David spoke little English, he found work in a textile plant. Within a year, Alice was pregnant.
The marriage went off pretty good, like maybe I'd say about the first couple of months. And then, already he was already starting with her. She couldn't wear makeup. She couldn't do anything. He was very jealous, very possessed of my sister.
By 1981, Alice and David had 3 children. Fatima says that as the years went by, David rarely lost an opportunity to snarl at Alice or the children.
David, vamos cá garfo.
Oh, come on, Dad.
David, já te disse, vamos cá garfo.
Não faz mal, eu vou buscar.
Oh, mulher, senta-te aí. Mas quem é que manda aqui nesta casa? David, vamos cá garfo.
She stayed with him because she figured, he's the father of the kids, and that's how she was brought up, you gotta be with your husband, and that's the way it is,
Quando é que tu vais? Fala comigo.
According to Fatima, David's anger seemed to erupt without cause and continue without end.
Quando é que tu vais? Estás a ouvir? Sempre a mesma coisa, sempre a mesma coisa.
He used to always say, if you ever leave me, I'm going to kill you. There's no other woman in my, for my life like you are. You're a good mother, you're a good cook. And he always had threatened her that if she ever decided to leave him for anybody, that he would kill her. But we never took it seriously,
Mas já viu o que ele fez outra vez na minha cara? Não posso mais viver assim, Deus. Não posso.
Sometimes she'd go up to my parents and tell my mom and dad, Ma, I can't take him anymore. He's always beating me up, or for any little reason, and he's always beating up the kids. And my parents would always tell her, you got to stay with him. He's your husband, It's going to be a shame to the family if you divorce him. We don't believe in divorces, so they kept shoving it back to him.
Finally, after 14 years of abuse, Alice found the courage to defy her parents and her husband.
She finally felt strong enough to say, I can't take it anymore, and she decided to get him out of the house. She finally sat down and says, David, I can't take it anymore. I want you to leave.
David moved out in the summer of 1988, and Alice began to build a new life for herself. She enrolled in nursing school, fulfilling a lifelong dream, and she began to see another man. But David Vieira would not let go. He began to stalk Alice at work and at home, night and day.
Onde é que estão aqui? Vê tomar banho.
Okay.
O David está aqui.
Tá a porta fechada?
Tá fechada.
Her boyfriend went by the house to see her that morning, and David drove up and down, and I think he spotted the boyfriend's car at the house, and my brother-in-law couldn't take that.
Alice's boyfriend witnessed the attack and ran a mile to the nearest police station to get help. Alice had been bludgeoned with a tire jack, then stabbed 24 times with a butcher knife. By the time authorities arrived at the scene, the young mother of 3 was dead. David Vieira was nowhere to be found.
We learned that he, in fact, had taken a bus from Fall River, Massachusetts, to Boston, Massachusetts, and then from Boston to Canada. Someone matching his description did, in fact, get off a bus in Canada near Hamilton, Ontario. And from that point on, we were unable to find out where he went.
Update. David Vieira had vanished, and for nearly 6 years he could not be found, until the night of our broadcast.
Our particular segment on that show aired our time here in New Bedford, Massachusetts at approximately 8:50 p.m. By 9:03 p.m., I was receiving telephone calls from Canada right here into my office with very good leads as to his whereabouts.
The first phone call that I received saying that they knew where he was, I just jumped up with joy and told my husband, I think we got him, you know, and I couldn't believe it took less than 48 hours to apprehend him.
Vieira had lived in Montreal for at least 2 years and was well known in the Portuguese community. He belonged to a neighborhood soccer team and was employed at a local fish market. Vieira's co-workers were stunned to learn about his secret past.
For me, it's a dream. I don't believe the guy do that. I don't believe. You know, it's, that guy is so nice.
True, because we see the picture.
Yeah.
If we don't see the picture, it's exactly the man. If we don't see, we never trust.
I've seen him apprehended and with handcuffs, and to me that was a sign of saying, thank God I can rest and my sister can also be at peace now that he's caught.
On our next Unsolved Mysteries, the fascinating saga of the infamous gangster Dutch Schultz and his lost treasure. Legend has it that in 1933, Schultz buried cash, gems, and bonds worth $7 million near a creek in upstate New York. Less than 2 years later, Schultz was gunned down by rival mobsters, and as far as anyone knows, his hidden fortune was never recovered. Join me next Wednesday for another intriguing edition of Unsolved Mysteries.